Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So Sony did have their quarterly conference call earlier, and they did reveal some interesting things here. They talked about official PlayStation 5 sales numbers as well as some future games that they have in development. And this here is what's really interesting because this just once again shows that PlayStation is approaching this generation just a little bit different than what they did with the PlayStation 4. It does seem like they have shifted their strategy quite a bit, so we're going to go over all of that here in a little bit. We also unfortunately do have to talk about a big delay today as well for the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5, so make sure to stay tuned for that one as well. To get things kicked off today, though, we're going to be talking about an upcoming timed PlayStation 5 exclusive being Ghostwire Tokyo. This is such an intriguing game because this is Shinji Mikame's next big project, which has worked on games like Resident Evil. He's worked on Dino Crisis and most recently The Evil Within. So he is a bit of a legend when it comes to these horror-style games, and here's his next big project. But up to this point, we haven't really seen or heard too much about this game, or at least until now. PlayStation has officially announced that Ghostwire Tokyo will get its own showcase tomorrow on February 3rd, where you'll see new gameplay and behind-the-scene details in a special presentation from Bethesda this Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. That means that this will be the second PlayStation showcase this week, as they're also revealing Gran Turismo 7 today, so it's been a pretty busy week for PlayStation overall. Nonetheless, we are finally going to get to see more on Ghostwire Tokyo. Being based off of the little gameplay that we have seen so far, this game does look quite a bit different, so I'll be really interested in seeing this one for myself tomorrow. That's the other part about this, though. We did also get an official release date. This is something that we've talked about over the last month, as several ratings have popped up for Ghostwire Tokyo, which oftentimes does signify release date is to follow, and that's exactly what happened here, as it's now set for a March 25th release date. So this one is right around the corner, and I have to say that the PlayStation 5 has a pretty good lineup for the first half of 2022. If you start to look at it, Horizon Forbidden West releases on February 18th, then you have Gran Turismo 7 on March 4th, now Ghostwire Tokyo is set for March 25th, and then you have Forspoken set to release on May 24th. So they do have a pretty busy half of 2022. Of course, though, keep in mind that Ghostwire Tokyo is actually a timed exclusive. This is a game that's technically owned by Xbox, as it is a Bethesda game, and it will eventually release on Xbox. But nonetheless, very excited to see this game tomorrow on February 3rd in that special showcase. Next up, EA also had their quarterly earning report yesterday, where they had something really interesting to say in terms of acquisitions. EA here did express interest in making acquisitions for the future. Now, this shouldn't be overly surprising, as EA has made some pretty big acquisitions over the last year, including Glue Mobile and Codemasters for around $3 billion. So they've already been on the hunt for acquisitions, but this just kind of shows that they are still looking for more going forward. And that to me is kind of important to some of the speculation and discussion that we have been seeing over the last couple weeks. Because ever since Microsoft announced their intent to acquire Activision Blizzard, there's been a lot of discussion about some of these publishers being picked up. But here with EA making some pretty big acquisitions as of recent, and it sounds like that they might be looking for even more, it sounds like that they are a part of the hunt for acquisitions rather than being the prey. They are looking to acquire, not to be acquired. Really, I think you can kind of say the same thing when it comes to Take-Two. Here recently, they did acquire Zynga for a massive $12.7 billion, so it doesn't sound like they're looking to sell, but rather it looks like they're looking to acquire. So as I've kind of said before, I don't really expect these big publisher acquisitions to suddenly become a common thing. The one that I do kind of look at as maybe being a possibility would be Konami, because they're not really doing too much with their IP anyway, so I could see them possibly being acquired by somebody. But outside of that, I don't really look at any of these big publishers as an obvious acquisition target. Activision Blizzard was a bit of a unique mess, which kind of helped that acquisition happen. Let's go ahead and talk about PlayStation, though, as they did reveal some really interesting things during their quarterly earning report, including the official sales numbers for the PlayStation 5. They did announce that they shipped 3.9 million units last quarter, bringing it up to a grand total of 17.3 million units as of December 31st of 2021. So the good news here is that the PlayStation 5 continues to sell at a rapid pace. But the bad news is that this actually did not meet the expectations of Sony, though this isn't because the demand of the PlayStation 5, it's rather because they are going through some very serious supply constraints. As we all know by this point, this generation has been impacted majorly by these chip shortages, and these consoles sell out pretty instantaneously as they just cannot reach demand. Really, all of the big three have been impacted by this, and this report here definitely shows that on PlayStation's end, Sony's goal was to outpace the PlayStation 4, and I do imagine if they had enough units to sell, they very possibly could be outpacing the PlayStation 4, but unfortunately, they just cannot produce enough units because of those chip shortages, and due to that, they did not reach their goal in outpacing the PlayStation 4. The PlayStation 4 in the same time frame did sell 20.2 million units, which means it is outpacing the PlayStation 5 by 2.9 million units. So that is a pretty significant amount, but hopefully we will start to see some improvement in terms of supply this year. This really has just been such a tough situation for these new consoles to launch in, and really all of the big three have been impacted pretty majorly by this. It's pretty obvious that the demand is just so much higher, but they just, unfortunately, they just cannot make enough units. Now, the other interesting thing that they talked about here was actually some of the games that they have in development, and this is quite a bit of a change when it comes to PlayStation games. They did reveal that they have plans to release 10 live service games by 2026. That means over the next 4 years, you're going to get several live service games from PlayStation, which this does seem to be a bit of a shift in strategy for PlayStation. Last generation, they did primarily focus on single-player story-driven games, but you're seeing this generation, they are taking live service games much more serious. Now, that does not mean that they do not have single-player games in development as well, but clearly one of their big focuses is on live service games. I mean, you can even kind of look at the Bungie acquisition to see how serious they're taking these style of games, because that's primarily what Bungie does. They do a good job of building a community with live service style of games, and we saw that with the original Halo trilogy, and this was before live service was really even a thing, and then we really saw them do that with Destiny 1 and 2. So they do know what they're doing when it comes to this type of stuff, and Sony actually did say here that is one of the reasons that they acquired Bungie. They did say that they believe Bungie can teach a lot to the other PlayStation studios about online platforms and service games. So it is becoming clear that this is one of their big focuses this generation. Third-party games last generation like Fortnite made Sony a lot of money, as this was the primary console for last generation, and I think Sony kind of looked at how much money was being made on these games and the potential that they could have making a first-party game like this, where they're going to get 100% of the cut rather than just 30%. There's some potential there to make a lot of money. PlayStation in the past, though, hasn't really been known for their multiplayer content, however, and that's really where Bungie's going to come in to help get this stuff right. That acquisition is starting to look like a smart thing, because we're starting to see a more clear-cut plan that they have for the future. Again, though, for fans that love PlayStation single-player games, they still have those in development as well, but this will diversify their portfolio a little bit more. As for what exactly these games are, however, I do actually think that we have at least a few that we already know of. One would be Factions coming from Naughty Dog. That is that multiplayer portion for The Last of Us Part 2. We know that they've been developing this game for a while, and I do imagine that is one of the games that they're talking about here. We also have been hearing a lot about a new Twisted Metal game that has some potential for some live service elements, so that could be one of them. They've also partnered up with Firewalk Studios and then Jade Raymond's new studio. Both of those are working on some kind of multiplayer game, and then on top of that, several job listings does point to Guerrilla Games working on a second game that has some style of live service content. So that's already 5 different games that we do know a little bit about, and as you can see, some of those are actually third-party partnerships. So, I mean, like I said before, I think this just kind of diversifies their portfolio just a little bit more. Some fans out there have stated that they want to see PlayStation do a little bit more than just these big cinematic third-person games, and it does sound like that they're going to do that this generation with a nice mix of single-player games alongside several multiplayer games in development as well. Next up, unfortunately, we do have a pretty big delay to talk about. I know this isn't really a big surprise by this point, as it seems like every single week there's a couple of game delays, but I know there's going to be some disappointment when it comes to this one, as this was a big AAA game, being Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. It was originally slated for a 2022 release, and we did actually get a gameplay reveal just here recently, and it's looking really good for that matter, but unfortunately it sounds like it has quietly been delayed until 2023. Now, as of this moment, we have not gotten an official announcement of this just yet. This is actually being reported by Bloomberg, which did state that they have delayed this internally, and it will now be releasing sometime in 2023. This was one of the bigger next-generation games that was originally set to release in 2022, and for those wanting more showcases for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series, this one here is a little bit disappointing, especially considering that we know Rocksteady is a high-quality studio. They did a great job with the Batman Arkham franchise, and they gained a lot of fans with those games, and we want to see what they can do next here with Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This one does seem quite a bit different, as, you know, of course you're playing as the villains, but again, the gameplay trailer that they showed here recently, it does look pretty good from what we're seeing so far. That's kind of my line of thinking on this, though. If they need to delay the game, then absolutely just go ahead and delay the game, get it fixed up, and make sure it's a high-quality release when it does eventually release. Hopefully, it'll be early in 2023, but with the anticipation built up around this game, they need to get it right when it first releases. And the thing about Rocksteady, again, they're a good developer, so I trust that they will make a good game here. In the meantime, though, there will be plenty of other games to play, and for that matter, something else that Warner Brothers did actually state here recently is that Harry Potter, that big Harry Potter RPG, it does sound like that game will be on track to release in 2022, and that's very noteworthy because we've actually been hearing a lot of rumors that it would be delayed, but it seems like Warner Brothers is still pretty confident that it will release sometime in 2022. Let's kind of hope that is the case, but really it just seems like with anything anymore, when it comes to release dates, nothing is really set in stone until the day it releases. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though, and with just so much talk about studios buying other studios, and now we're hearing rumors that more big acquisitions might be on the horizon. Well, I wanted to ask you all, with more acquisitions on the horizon, are you concerned about consolidation of the game industry? And as you can see here, 33% of you said yes, while the majority of you all, being 60%, said no. So right now, it does seem like most of you all are not overly concerned about this situation. Looking through the comments, several of you all did mention that you trust Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony, and as long as it's not other big companies coming in like Tencent, Google, Apple, and so on and so forth, then you're kind of okay with the situation as it stands. And I think that there's even some optimism about what has been happening as of recent. I think with Activision Blizzard, there is a lot of optimism about this acquisition just because of how that company has been handled over the last couple years. They've done away with their creative freedom. They've shoehorned all of their developers on Call of Duty. They've treated their employees absolutely terribly. So when Microsoft came in to acquire them, or at least they have their intent to acquire them right now, there's this optimism that they're going to kind of fix those problems up. So I think that's one of the reasons that much of the community is not overly upset with this acquisition. Some of you all also mentioned just how big the game industry is, and for somebody like myself who grew up in the 90s, today's gamers actually have it made. It just feels like that there's always something to look forward to, whether it's coming from a big publisher, a first-party studio, a third-party studio, an independent studio. There's just always something interesting to look forward to. There's always creativity around every corner. On top of that, Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft, they do offer their studios creative freedom, so it doesn't seem like when they acquire something, it really hinders any type of creativity. Now, if Amazon, Google, or somebody else came in, that might be a different story, and this kind of goes back to the trust that we were talking about a moment ago. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.